How are we doing today? AI Trump has dropped a cover of the 50 Cent song Many Men, which is currently trending at number 28 on YouTube Music. The real Trump has been turned into a living martyr and given an opportunity to show how he responds when someone tries to take his life in public. I mean, no amount of money, energy, time, resources. I don't think he could have done what they have done, what the aftermath of this tragedy has done for him. He could have never done without the other side deciding to take it this far. And the fact that he stood up and he was not afraid, shuttled off the stage, huddled down, hidden. He stopped. The man got his shoes and he stood there and said, "Fight, fight, fight," showing that he will not be afraid. He will not give up. He's probably thought about the idea that this could be a possibility and has already come to terms with it because his response was ice cold, as far as I'm concerned. I don't think anybody watching could get shot in the ear and not be a little shooken up. I could be wrong, but it, to me, seemed like a pretty impressive moment, along with a photograph that you also couldn't recreate. Blood on your face, a bullet hole in your ear, standing underneath the American flag with your fist raised, unafraid and committed to what you believe in. Even if you don't like his policies, even if you don't like his personality, I don't see how you can't say that it's not a respectable response to an extreme action that is completely unacceptable and everyone should condone. Even people on the other side who do hate him should understand that once you condone the shooting of politicians who are saying things that are not well received or are disliked by certain groups, well, that means that possibly your candidate, who's doing a good job in your state or you think is doing a good job for the nation, they could be next. So while it might seem like a good idea when it's targeted at someone that you don't like, understand that it could easily come back and be used against someone that you do like. With that said, Biden further seems to be confused on stage, mixing up the name of his vice president, Kamala Harris, with Trump, and then also referring to Zelensky as Putin. Additionally, during the debate, if you watched it, he confused Social Security with beating COVID. So he said we beat Social Security when he was trying to say we beat COVID-19. He also recently had an interesting moment on stage, which personally I think just needs to be seen instead of explained. We can all draw our own conclusions from what we see. It's sad and confusing to watch. It clearly shows that the person in the position of president is not as consequential or as important as we all might have thought, because I don't know. I see him drift in and out of being here, being asleep, falling asleep during important moments, indicating that he's not aware necessarily that this is a moment with some gravity. And then also mixing up people's names. I mean, I think maybe the base requirement of being a president is being able to keep track of who you're around, what event you're attending, what day it is. I don't know. I guess that's probably a controversial opinion nowadays, but kind of makes sense to me. Anyway, let's watch the video. So, trying to figure out what is going on here.
Distinguished guests, please welcome the Honorable Lloyd J. Austin.
It's just really weird behavior for president, and it seems like people who are parents and people who've worked with elderly people in nursing homes are familiar with that type of body positioning. I'm not sure what's going on. You know what I mean? But it just seems strange at the least. I think we've gotten to a point, it seems, where hating Trump to the point where you think that voting for someone who could be exhibiting some potential signs of dementia is a better alternative than voting for someone who gets shot in the ear and clearly demonstrates on stage that they are still committed to the idea of getting elected president and trying to root out some of the corruption that he has been talking about for the last several years. And I think he's drawn some of the corruption out of the system by the attacks, the coordinated attacks by the media to start, and then escalating to coordinated attacks by the legal system, and now coordinated attacks if you're not going to just believe that a 20-year-old with no training and very poor shooting ability was able to defeat Secret Service protocol and shoot a presidential candidate in the ear. It doesn't make a lot of sense. You can believe it if you want, but it seems like a tall tale. And the behavior of the Secret Service is a little bit bizarre. We're going to go through some of that. I pulled up a few things, but if I had the choice, I would say that having more candidates for office who are willing to stand up and say things that draw this kind of attention, that draw out the corruption and make these systems that are supposedly our friends suddenly attack these people. I take that as an indication that they're saying something that is being perceived as a threat to their continued power under the status quo, and they don't want things to change. So the media comes out and they're trying to slander him and say all these bad things and tell you what to think. And then the legal system comes and makes him a felon, further increases his support. And then they decide that's not enough. He's gaining power. He's gaining support of the American people through the things he says and the things that he's doing. And then they decide to do something which does way more for him, even though he did get shot in the ear, does way more for him than they could have ever possibly imagined. I would say out of the possible outcomes, the best would have been for him to not have an assassination attempt and for us to use discourse and our words instead of violence, because we're supposedly so advanced culturally and our society is so amazing and we've made so much progress since the early 1900s, right? Everything is so much better. So the best outcome would have been to be civilized and not shoot someone who's up on stage just talking. The second best outcome, I would say, is what happened. For him to actually get shot in the ear, the American people to see it, see his reaction and response to it, and then for his opponents to have to deal with the fact that there are consequences for what they have done, and they have just generated even more support. It would have been better for them if he'd gotten shot at and no one had gotten hit, so there were no dead bodies, there was no shooter, there was no wound, so people could just dismiss it and say it's fake news. And obviously the worst outcome would have been for him to be taken off the table as an option for the American people that do want to choose him with their freedom to vote for the best candidate that their conscience, morals, values, whatever you're basing your vote on, whatever they think is the best option for America and our society. Taking him off the table, in my opinion, could lead to violence in the streets of America. I I I, I personally truly believe that you've basically got, if you consider all three options being equal, just for the simplicity of breaking it down, they're not equal. There's not equal percentage chances of these three things happening, but if there were, then you have three possible outcomes. And I think only one of them doesn't lead to the chance of civil war inside of our country very soon. So the first option that wouldn't lead to civil war is Trump being elected and trying to turn things around, trying to root out corruption, trying to go after some of these agencies that seem to be working in concert with one political party. The other two options, Trump being killed, I think could lead to civil war. I think there's people on the right who are in military and gun culture who, based on the events of January 6th and their response to that, I mean, they went after these people. They found these people through credit card usage in D.C. on the day, through traffic cameras, through cameras. If they didn't cover their face, they were caught on video inside the Capitol. If they did cover their face, some of these people were found using financial records from banks for credit card usage in Washington, D.C. on that day. Some of them were found via traffic cameras, tracing them back to the vehicle they originated from, and then tracing that vehicle and getting the plate off of it. So clearly, they want to disincentivize that type of response by the American public. Just showing up and peacefully demonstrating that you're not happy is no longer acceptable in America. So clearly they don't want a repeat of a January 6th type event. But during that time, people thought that there was a chance that they could demonstrate and have the election results reviewed. In my personal belief, I believe that was what was behind it. These people are being prosecuted as basically violent criminals trying to overthrow the government, not just exercising their free rights as Americans. So that's interesting. But I think that the murder of Donald Trump publicly would possibly anger people who support him more than arguing over what happened with the last election. And then I also think, speaking of the last election, that if we see the same results and the same strange events that there's videos of during the last election that was never properly investigated, in my estimate, I think that that the same result as the last election, the same person being elected as the last election, could also produce a more pronounced but similar type event to what happened on January 6th, at the minimum, if it doesn't, go from there. And there's a book that I think recently was published about how civil wars start. And this person went to some countries that have had civil wars within the lifetime of the people who are currently alive inside the country, so they can be interviewed. And the general consensus of her interviewing people inside multiple different countries who had experienced civil war, the consensus among the interviewed were that they didn't see it coming. Just like a stock market crash, the market starts crashing and things start happening faster than you can sell in a lot of instances, and that's why a lot of people lose money. If everybody could sell at the top, we'd all do it. But not everybody can sell at the top. Only the lucky are able to sell at the top. And the same thing applies when something like civil war kicks off. You might think that the planning might be visible, and the dominoes might start to slowly fall at first, and things might escalate, and you might be aware of this developing. But from the information that she collected in the process of writing that book, that is not the conclusion that was drawn after doing the research. The conclusion that was drawn, that no one saw it coming, and it happens so fast. You wake up on a Monday morning thinking you're going to work, and you find out that violence has erupted in your country, and it only takes a matter of hours or days, and it spreads through the whole country. So it is a concern. The fact that nuclear powers are getting dangerously close to direct war is also concerning, because the nuclear response protocols are predicated on the idea that no one's going to push that red button. Mark my words when I say, if any lone actor like this lone gunman who has access to a nuclear weapon decides to push that red button, mutually assured destruction is the protocol. Pretty much guaranteed that if one gets deployed, it will be followed by much, much more destruction. So we don't want either of those outcomes, right? We want to return to rationality. We want to return to being able to talk to each other instead of hate each other to the point of committing acts of violence. I think, but I'm just a crazy conspiracy theorist. We're going to get into that too, because, everybody loves a good conspiracy, especially when so many of them turn out to be true. So one of the things on the face of this is the fact that the audience was aware that there could be a potential problem somehow before the people who are supposed to be the ones who notice this type of thing. These people are supposed to notice when someone has a gun or a bomb. That's their entire job. So it's a catastrophic failure of their ability to do the one job that they have, which is to protect the person that they're assigned to from getting shot, blown up, harmed. That's their job. When you go to work, do you show up and do your job, or do you just show up and kind of, go sit in the bathroom for 2 hours on your phone and then take an early lunch break and extend it into the afternoon and then leave early? I mean, it seems like a lot of people were checked out in this situation. So the claims are being made that signs of trouble were evident in the minutes before the shots rang out at Donald Trump's rally. Police had a report of a suspicious man pacing and were apparently exchanging photos of the suspect. Witnesses pointed and shouted at an armed man on a nearby rooftop, and still it took them 42 seconds to address this. Apparently, the claim is that maybe this guy was in the sniper scope for 3 minutes before he was able to pull the trigger, because before the gunman opens fire, it is the decision of the scene commander whether or not to take that shot. You have to be given authorization. Once that armed person fires a shot, then the decision is transferred to the person behind the trigger. So once shooting starts, the rules of engagement state that all shooters are cleared to engage the active threat. But not until. Up until, you can be pointed right at him, but you got to get on the radio and ask for permission. I don't know if that's a good process. I really don't know. I'm not in charge of protecting anybody. This was the site. This was the stage. It was at the Butler Farm Show site. Massive failure. Massive failure, and at the very least, someone with no experience, no military background, 20-year-old. I mean, as a 20-year-old at one point myself, I can tell you that most 20-year-olds are not capable of slow, long-term critical thought. At that age, you're not really good at thinking about the long-term consequences, making a complicated plan, especially with no relevant background experience. And again, there's testimony that he was apparently an awful awful shot. He was not a qualified marksman. But supposedly, he just decided that he was going to do this. He came up with a plan that was airtight, enabled him to get within 150 meters of the president and take multiple shots, one of which connected with his ear. So came very close to succeeding in spite of many disadvantages that he had. So this is a rundown of this is a visual timeline. This is the stage. This is another example of where the gunman was. Law enforcement sniper. The wounded rally attendee was here. I'm sure bullet trajectories are going to be broken down a lot more. Right now, that information does not seem to be available. There are people asking the question of whether this guy acted alone, whether there was only one gunman, or if this was just like a magic trick where this guy was just a distraction and there was another person involved in a different location at a different distance who has not been even alluded to, for the most part, by the official narrative. 6:30, he takes to the stage. 6:03, Trump takes the stage. 6:05, song concludes. 6:11, he turns to his right and gestures toward a screen with a chart showing statistics on border crossing. Around the same time, rally attendees notice a man with a gun on the roof. In a video posted on social media, one attendee can be heard yelling, "He's on the roof, he's got a gun." Seconds later, gunshot is heard. Trump stops mid-sentence and flinches. He reaches for his right ear as another two shots are quickly fired and ducks behind the lectern. One male Secret Service agent is heard yelling, "Get down, get down, get down." This photograph supposedly shows the projectile going by him. Secret Service agents surround Trump as a burst of 5 more shots is fired. About 42 seconds after the shooting began, agents stay crouched over Mr. Trump until an agent can be heard saying, "Shoot her down." So that's the relevant portion of that. This is a 3D model, again showing the scene. This is the stage. This is the shooter's location. They recreated the podium. 2 sniper teams shown in the red dots. Their sights appeared to be trained to the north in the direction of this building where Crooks was seen climbing the roof. They don't know the exact view that the teams had. It's possible the line of sight was obscured by trees. I guess that might be possible. Second sniper team positioned on the building behind Trump further south had a wider view of the area. Footage shows Crooks appearing to army crawl into position about 150 meters away. From the rooftop, he likely had a clear view of Trump. And he also had a little bit of cover from the pitch of the roof. I also pulled up Google Earth, and I'm just going to bring this up. So the idea that people are throwing out there, and again, other than just from a position of logic and just saying, it kind of doesn't make sense that a 20-year-old with no training was able to defeat supposedly the most advanced security provided for elected officials. I don't know. But the thought is that potentially Trump was here, that shooter was here, he was a clear and close distraction to have the sniper teams engage and focus on him. Meanwhile, potentially, and I think you have to stick somewhat with this bullet trajectory because it does make sense. He turned to the screen on his right. The bullet passed the right side of his ear, hit his ear. Someone over here was killed in the audience. So I think you have to stick with somewhat this type of a trajectory. I don't know what's been investigated about the water tower, but it does not seem that the water tower had anybody on it. I would hope that they would have had someone posted here. I don't know. This has not been mentioned. but it's not that far off. It's not on the other side. It's not completely in a cardinal direction going the wrong way for the trajectory of the bullet. Depending on how far Trump turned his head, I don't know. I'm not going to speculate on that, but just the idea that if we were going to look at the surrounding landscape and try to understand what other opportunities are out here, this Google Earth kind of gives a 3D model. So you follow out here. I mean, here's a flat roof with what appears to be some cover. That seems pretty close. The next viable option are these buildings. None of these look like a great opportunity. I think that a trained marksman would go all the way back here to either one of these buildings. This one has cover on the roof. I mean, this one has a great, if you were wearing a white ghillie suit, I think that this location could be something that someone with training might elect to take, because I mean the longest, let's see, longest recorded sniper kill is 4,156 yards, and we're talking about 150 yards. So that building, if a shot can be made at 4,000 yards, then a 1,000-yard shot, 2,000-yard shot is well within the capability of a trained marksman with a built-in ballistics computer on their scope that auto ranges everything, puts dope on the scope, could even measure wind. You can have an external device that measures wind speed. I mean, that is absolutely, with the weapons platforms that are out there, very, very, very easily done by someone with the training and practice to support taking a shot like that. Even a 1,000-yard shot for someone who's untrained is nearly impossible, but is very, very easy. I mean, there's 1,000-yard competitions where these guys are shooting an inch at 1,000 yards. The other thing we'll go through is the basics of what they know about the shooter, Thomas Matthew Crooks. He was a kitchen worker. He scrubbed all his social media, didn't have ID. They used DNA and facial recognition. The DNA is weird because he didn't have a criminal record, so his DNA wouldn't have been in the database potentially. I don't know how they confirmed that, where they got his DNA, where the database containing his DNA was. How they did that is a little bit confusing to me. Was very smart, graduated with a prize for math and science. He worked in a nursing home kitchen. Graduated with an associate degree. He was in a BlackRock commercial. I'm not sure if they're going to mention that, but that's pretty weird because the conspiracy theorists, or me, I don't trust BlackRock. And if anybody has the resources to make something like an assassination on a presidential candidate happen, I would submit that it would be someone with an extreme amount of resources, somebody like a BlackRock, or numerous others with the proper motivation could fund that. I mean, it's either got to be a lone gunman acting on his own, or it's a conspiracy. I'm not sure which it is. The one thing I'll say before I go any further talking about the conspiracy thing is, if it is an organized conspiracy, the idea that the people in charge would greenlight a 20-year-old taking on this kind of a critical mission to eliminate a very dangerous political rival doesn't seem likely. If it was a conspiracy, I would say that the only way that the people in positions of power would say that this has got a viable shot of working is if he was just a distraction and they had a properly trained person with the background and experience to pull this off, and that person was the one that missed the shots. Not the shooter that we know about. An unknown shooter from a much greater distance who they believed could make this happen. Otherwise, I would say Thomas Crooks just threw the biggest monkey wrench into the Democrat Party that you possibly could. So there's people that are claiming that he's a Republican supporter. Apparently he also donated to the DNC. It's very confusing why anybody would think that this is a good idea. It's also, I guess, indicative of a 20-year-old brain to not think it through enough to understand the consequences of your actions. So on one hand, it kind of does seem likely that this is just a crazy madman who did something extreme. On the other hand, if there is a greater conspiracy and there's more involved than just a 20-year-old random guy who's able to defeat all the security protocols and take on the Secret Service and basically win, almost win. I mean, that seems unlikely, but crazy things happen in the world all the time that can't be explained. You know, children get run over by a bus. Horrible things happen that don't make any logical sense. So it's not off the table, but certainly doesn't add up when you just look at it and say, oh, yeah, this makes total sense. Look at the evidence. This guy had all the skills and all the motivation, and, you know, it's all there. He posted the social media video that we need to show what he was thinking and all this stuff, and none of that exists. So it's suspicious. Who doesn't have social media in this day and age? He donated $15 to a liberal campaign, Act Blue, in 2021. He had a membership to a local shooting club. He used an AR-style weapon. He bought 50 rounds on the day of the shooting. He was wearing a Demolition Ranch t-shirt, probably to fit in. A lot of Demolition Ranch fans might attend a Trump rally, I would think. What kind of person was he? He was frequently bullied and sometimes wore hunting outfits to school. Another classmate said he was getting good grades on tests and very passionate about history. Anything on government and history he seemed to know about, but it was nothing out of the ordinary. He was always nice. He's well liked by his teachers. He's remembered as quiet. Someone said he was intelligent but weird. And then this is referencing what a terrible shot he was. Apparently he tried out for the Bethel Parks High School varsity rifle team. According to Jamison Myers, who graduated alongside Crooks in 2022, he told CBS that Crooks did not make the team. He did not even make the junior varsity team after trying out. Myers added, he never returned to tryouts for the remainder of high school. Another former classmate said that he shot terrible and wasn't really fit for the rifle team. The school district said there was no record of Crooks trying out for the team, and he never appeared on a roster. Okay. That makes sense. What, you keep records of everybody who tries out? I don't, not at my school. I mean, the funding was not all that great. They didn't have extra people sitting around to take notes on worthless information. So that's not really unexpected in my opinion. So it's a confusing time to be an American. It's a concerning time to see our civil discourse completely break down and just turn into violence against political candidates that we don't agree with. You know, families and friends are being lost over votes, who you're voting for. When I was younger, Everybody used to put family and friends first, and political differences were not even second. They were a distant, low priority, because the reality is that as social creatures, we engage with those around us until we're given social media devices, which make us stop engaging with those around us and start engaging online with people all over the world. In some cases, engaging with people that aren't even real. They're just bots. They're trolls from Russia, from China, from these bot farms, where you've got computers running hundreds or thousands of phones, clicking, liking, driving content that they want to the top, and minimizing stuff that shouldn't be seen, as well as the fact that the algorithm leans into things and gives you more of things that you engage with. And most people don't engage with stuff that they don't really give a shit about. That would be just generic content that's not extreme, doesn't make you super happy, doesn't make you super angry. We as people, sadly, have been figured out by a dumb algorithm to the point where we are only shown puppies. If we engage with happy stuff, puppies and kittens, that'll show up on your feed. And also things that you hate, you make a comment, oh, this is BS, I hate this, whatever. Or things that you, maybe it's not puppies that make you really happy, maybe it's people who agree with your political views. So I think a lot of people have feeds that are full of stuff that hypes them up and makes them think the world is going in a better direction, and then also content that makes them think that everything's about to come crashing down and the world is rotten, all the systems are rotten, the financial system's rotten, the political system is plagued with corruption. I mean, at one time, the governments used to be larger than the corporations that were inside of them. Now, some of these corporations are worth more than the GDP of most countries, except for the most wealthy of all countries. So, the paradigm is shifting. It used to be big government could regulate small corporations, small businesses that operated within their borders. Now you have global corporations that operate globally and are not dependent on any single nation. So a nation passing a law that says that you can't do business the way you're doing business inside our country is not a catastrophic loss to a company that can operate globally. They can either change their operating procedure and continue to operate in that market in a different way, or they can just decide to withdraw completely because they don't need that revenue stream and they're not willing to make that compromise. Either way, in my opinion, governments have lost control of the corporations that they are supposed to regulate to protect the way of life of a normal, minuscule, poor, regular human being in the face of these massive organized corporations with black hole size bank accounts. Bank accounts so big that they have their own gravity and suck in other smaller corporations through acquisitions with their excess profits. I mean, that just makes sense, right? You got $100 million sitting around. You can invest it by buying a company that makes $10 million a year. In 10 years, you've paid off everything you spent, and now you just get an extra $10 million a year in your budget. Why would you not do that? You'd have to be stupid. And unlike traditional wealth, when it was held by persons, you can't really control who you have as a kid. Maybe your kid is just like you and is an excellent business-minded person, continues to build the empire. Other people have kids that just want to sit back and drink margaritas by the pool, spend daddy's money till it's all gone. And so you didn't have continuity in wealth the way that you're going to have in corporations, because corporations are run by board of directors that are elected based on merit. And when someone is unfit to do their job, they get fired and replaced by someone who is willing to do a good job and can do a good job. So I think that a board of directors, rather than just taking a chance on who your kids are going to be, is a much more foolproof way to continue a financial empire. So without drastic change, I think that Anybody who is taking a long-term view of the events and the climate inside this country can only draw the conclusion that we are headed for more and more division, which ultimately could result in violence on American soil. There's a lot of people in the government that seem to want the endless wars to continue. They seem to want the endless profits from dropping bombs and rebuilding cities that we blow up to continue. And while there might be a lot of money in it, I don't think there's a lot of humanity in behaving that way, voting for people who lead the country down a path like that. I don't think any of it is good for regular American citizens, and I hope that we can start voting the people that are sitting in these seats out and replacing them with, at the minimum, someone new. Hopefully someone new who has an interest in America thriving and surviving. But I think at the very least, just removing them, getting rid of those people, is change. And change is what we need. So rather than coming up with a perfect plan and electing the perfect people, I think that an easy step would be to start voting against people who are holding these positions and trying out some new people. And also sending a message that your job is not safe. We're not going to vote for you if you're a terrible person and you're a terrible representative. You're doing terrible things. You're not representing us. You're taking payouts. And 4 years into holding your position, you're suddenly worth over $1 million when you only make $150,000 a year. Something about that math doesn't add up. And I don't know if they're getting direct contributions. I don't know if they're just doing insider trading because they know what laws are going to get passed or are likely to get passed, and they're investing in the stock market accordingly. I mean, I think in the old days, politicians took these payments, but they took them secretly off the books in some offshore account that we never knew about. Now they're doing it in broad daylight. Now it's reportable wealth. It's wealth that they've been taxed on. It's wealth that they've declared. It's wealth they can spend. It's been laundered or whatever needs to be done to make it viable income, and somehow it's legally on their books. But it's not a good look for someone who doesn't have money to come into office and suddenly be worth over $1 million after one term or after a couple of years. It doesn't even make any sense. Because I, as a regular poor American, cannot give every elected official who represents my interests a couple bucks every time they do something good. I don't have it in the budget. So they're not making any extra money from doing the right thing and representing us and our interests and keeping America free and great and prosperous for future generations, etc., etc. They don't get any extra for that. They don't get any extra for doing the right thing. So, again, the logical conclusion is that the only way that you get extra money is for doing the wrong thing, for selling out the American people. You get kickbacks from big interests with big bank accounts for pandering to them at the expense of you and I, the taxpayer, the one who's working out there and isn't given a choice but to give up 30% of whatever you make with your hard work, whatever value that you generate with your hard work. The government takes 30% without your permission. They'll put you in jail if you don't pay it. And then they go send it overseas. They don't do anything beneficial to this country or the people in it. They don't help veterans. They don't help the homeless. They don't build more roads. They send hundreds of billions of dollars overseas into war zones where we don't really have good tracking on where that money is going, how it's being spent. It just we're just sending it over there, hoping it helps, you know. And we have to fund that. Meanwhile, rich people can structure their assets so they can write things off. Oh, my second home is an investment property. I rent it out. So it's all tax deductible. All the renovations, all this, all that, it's all write-off. It goes against my income. Why would I not do that? It reduces my tax obligation, and if I have enough of these things that I'm investing in, I can bring my taxes way, way down by spending my money and buying assets. Meanwhile, you and I can't deduct the basic expenses that we need to live, and the government's not ever going to let that happen because they need that tax revenue. They don't want you reducing your tax obligations. That's only for their buddies, their friends, the ones that are giving them all the money so that they can get elected and enrich themselves. So I think we got a very deep problem in this country that is not limited to just the presidential position. And the sooner we realize that no president is going to be able to save us from this. I know everybody's looking for a daddy to come save them. Mommy or daddy to come save them. The truth is that we need to do that with our freedom to vote. We need to speak with our wallets as to what businesses we patronize, and we need to speak with our votes as far as who we're going to elect into these offices, and more importantly, who we're going to remove after we clearly see them not do the things that they promise to do when we allow them the privilege of being put in these positions where they do have access to power. We put them there with the hope that they're going to do the right thing and keep life good for regular Americans instead of making life amazing for the rich and the corporate interests who give them all kinds of money. So I hope that we can turn this around. I hope that we're aware enough to be paying attention and take some action here. So anyway, take care. I'll see you again soon.